No matter who you are or where you go, heading outside, even for just a few minutes, is well worth it. Welcome to Humans Outside, where we're using the Humans Outside 365 Challenge to build a life habit around spending time in nature while learning from fascinating outdoor-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz. I've let curiosity be my guide as a journalist for 19 years. But life, including my husband's injuries from military service, had us looking for a better way to live. So we moved sight unseen to Alaska to see if an outdoor-focused life was the answer. Since September 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter what, to explore how nature can change my life. Ready to hear from experts and outdoor lovers who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same? Let's go! It's a question I get all the time, and a topic people are really nervous about getting right when they first start to head outside. How do you dress for cold weather? How can you get outside without being miserable when temperatures are absolutely frigid? Staying comfortable outside in cold weather is about so many things. It's a safety issue because getting too cold really can be dangerous. And it's a mental health thing, because if heading outside is safe and comfortable, you're likely to do it more often. Both experts and those of us who live in cold climates will confirm that getting outside regularly in the winter, preferably in the daylight hours, is not just a nice to have, it's the secret to winter success. Finally, knowing how to dress in the winter is also going to make it easier to try new things in cold weather, things like skiing or winter running. And when you feel like you can try new things, suddenly life gets a lot more interesting and fun. Okay, that's my pitch for learning how to dress in the winter and getting outside no matter the weather. But what I haven't done is told you how to do that. How the heck do you dress for cold weather? How do you know what to wear? How do you avoid having to experiment with 1,000 different types of jackets? I'm not going to tell you any of that. But today's guest, Sarah Histand, is. She's the owner of Mind and Mountain, where she's a mental health-informed adventure fitness trainer and founder of the wildly popular training program Ski Babes. She's focused on women specifically, but through her work also focuses on this core value we all share. Getting outside is for everyone. Sarah is from here in Alaska originally and has focused a lot of her work on helping beginners get outside. That makes her pretty much the perfect person to talk to about the nuts and bolts of dressing for cold weather. Sarah, welcome to Humans Outside.
Thanks so much for having me. What a great introduction.
Well, I am just really honored to spend some time with you this morning. You are a busy lady. You've got Ski Babes, just as we're recording this, has recently rolled out. Of course, it's still available for people to check out. But why don't you kick off by telling us about your favorite outdoor space? We kind of like to imagine ourselves hanging out wherever our guests really love outside, as if we're just there having a conversation together. So where are we with you today?
Well, I'd love for us all to be at this beautiful beach in outside of Valdez, Alaska. I don't live there anymore. I live in Anchorage now, but Valdez is where I was living before this. And it's a really beautiful ocean town. And from my house in Valdez, I could take a trail out the back door and either in the summer walk down there or in the winter skate ski down to the ocean and end up in this just gorgeous 360 view of mountains all around and like beautiful ocean, sometimes some seals, definitely some birds. If the sun's out, you can see the mountains from the ocean all the way up to like 5,000 feet. And it's just like so beautiful everywhere you look.
Valdez gets a lot of snow. And unrelated fun fact, they have a lot of bunnies.
They do.
It's like a bunny.
It's very random.
It's very random. I bet no one anticipated me saying that. No, it's like, it's almost like a rabbit infestation, except they're adorable because they're rabbits.
Yeah, somebody apparently had like a pet rabbit that got loose and then multiplied, and now they're like feral and they're just everywhere.
Yeah, a little Valdez lore for y'all today. Okay, so give us a little bit of background. How did you become someone who likes to go outside? And then how did you get into this work of blending mental health and outdoor adventure focused fitness for women?
Yeah, well, so I grew up here in Alaska in Soldotna, and my family's from the Midwest originally. My parents ended up here after they got married, kind of randomly. And so we grew up spending time outside doing kind of mellower, like canoeing and little hikes and things. But I definitely grew up appreciating the outside and being in relationship with nature, sledding and all the kind of stuff we would do as a kid. And then as I started to grow up into adulthood and wanted to try some of the more ambitious outdoor stuff that I saw people doing, I was always pretty intimidated and like dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome, and in some ways still do. It's like a part of stepping into more challenging things outside. And when I was living in Valdez, actually, some of that there's a lot of skiing there in the winter because of all the snow. And I was learning to backcountry ski at that time. And while I was learning to backcountry ski, I was working my day job at the running the gym there and teaching fitness classes to people in town. And I was also finishing a master's degree in social work, so learning a bunch of mental health stuff. And these three worlds just kind of intersected all at the same time. So the learning to ski, the fitness, I could tell that the fitness classes I was teaching was really helping my skiing and my success on the mountains and learning to ski without getting injured. And then I was also working really hard in the mental health world and seeing how helpful the mental health skills were for the ups and downs of learning how to ski as an adult and how humbling that whole experience can be. So just kind of all came together in this idea that like mental health and physical health and outdoor time really like they all support each other. And there's really like separating them out. I feel like so much of fitness is just fitness and so much of mental health is just mental health, but for outdoor time we're using it all.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And when you mention this connection of like learning to ski as an adult, that reminds me of just like learning to be outside at all as an adult. If that's not something that's core to you in your background, it can be very daunting to get out there and make this a part of who you are. And I mean, appropriate for today's conversation when it comes to knowing how to dress. I think that's just like this huge mental block, if nothing else.
there's so much of in our adult lives that we spend doing things that we've learned we're good at. And it can be quite awkward and uncomfortable to take on something where you're on a learning curve again, whether it's just like physically uncomfortable because you're like trying out new things, and especially winter, like has a bunch of discomfort with it as you learn how to dress for the conditions that you're in and for your body. And then there's also like the humbling factor of just being like, gosh, I'm just not that good at this right now. And this is not so much fun all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to get here into the nuts and bolts, but I want to say two things. First of all, you and I are in Alaska. It's cold here. That's sort of like famous Alaska fact, right? If anyone knows anything about Alaska, they know that it's cold or can be very cold. But cold and the experience of temperature is really relative to where you are and what you have experienced until this point. And so if you're listening to this and you're in Texas and you're thinking, oh gosh, this doesn't apply to me, or I'm not as cold as they are, and doing maybe a comparison thing, stop doing that. Don't do that. Cold is cold. This is relative to where you are and what you've experienced so far. And you and I were talking just before we started recording about how there's that week every year where maybe it's a lot warmer than it'll be in the depths of winter, but colder than it has been. And we're still adjusting and we are busting out the big jacket.
Totally. It's so interesting how this time of year we're recording this in October and it was just summer. I mean, I guess it's been a couple months now since it was really summer, but we just got sort of our first dose of cold weather up here recently. And it is a shock to the system when you're used to more comfortable temperatures, and something that, like, any drop in 20 degrees below what you're used to is like, that takes some really getting used to. And then, like, at least for my body, once I've experienced it for a few days, and then it gets a little bit easier each time. And we were talking about how by the spring, these temperatures won't feel that bad. We'll be in like t-shirts because we'll be so excited that it's up into the 20s finally. But this time of year, it feels really cold, and it is so relative. And our bodies are so incredible about calibrating to what they're in, but it takes some time to get there. So,
Yes, exactly. So don't be like, oh, my cold's not that cold. And then the next thing is stop, if you're doing this, stop comparing yourself or judging yourself or shaming yourself for feeling cold or having a hard time with this. This is a learning experience. Everybody, oh, I mean, Sarah, you and I have both learned how to dress in the cold. I learn how to dress in the cold once a year. It's a whole new thing for me every October. I'm getting a little bit better at it as we go the longer I live here. But it's like going out and doing a sport you haven't done for a long time. Like, do I remember how to ride a bike? Let's find out.
isn't
And
that funny? I have
yeah.
that too this time of year where it's like I for sure grew up doing, I've done this all my life, but still this time of year I'm like, oh right, gloves. I
Right,
forgot about gloves.
exactly. Maybe that's why we're so cold in
Yeah.
October.
Dang it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure people know that y'all are listening to us and knowing that we're not sitting here judging you for being cold any more than we judge ourselves for being cold. And this is just like a super learning experience for everyone. Hey, humans. If you want to build your own outdoor habit, the Humans Outside 365 Challenge is a great way to get started. You can even score some really cool and exclusive challenge swag, including a finisher decal and medal in the process. All you need to do is visit humansoutside.com/challenge. You'll also get an outdoor challenge guide written by me for you, an exclusive challenge tracker, and insider info all year long. You don't want to be left out of this. Go to humansoutside.com/challenge to learn more now. Okay, back to the show. So, Sarah, can you maybe start by talking to us about the basics? You teach people how to go outside in all weather. You teach people how to be fit and mentally strong for winter sports here in Alaska. What is the first thing you tell people who are just learning how to do this? What is the first thing people need to know about dressing for cold weather?
I would say the first thing would just be the skill of experimentation and just feeling like you can baby step your way into whatever it is you're trying to move toward. And like, this is even, I do trauma informed work and we use the term titration a lot for, and this works in fitness too. We're just like trying to take baby steps toward challenge and give ourselves breaks in between so our body actually knows that it's safe as it's approaching challenge. And I think about that same thing with cold temperatures and dressing is like, you've got to go through some trial and error to find what works for you. And the way to do that without it being like overly miserable or something that makes you like never want to do it again is to try it for a little bit, for a walk around the block, for if that works, go a little bit longer next time. Just go really easy on yourself and baby step your way.
Yeah, that's so good. No, I'm unaware. I mean, if there is a prize, let me know. But I'm unaware of a prize for like being the coldest or dressing the best in cold weather. I've never heard of this. So,
Truly. No, there's nothing to be gained for pushing it too fast.
yeah. Okay, good. Because I like to win prizes. So if there is, no, I'm kidding.
I feel like when I was a teenager here and we were like showing off how tough we were, there was a little bit of ego prize there, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe after you're through that stage,
yeah.
it's not so.
No one wins a prize for shortcutting the process. Take your time. I love that. Experiment. Go with what, follow your own path on this and take it easy and make sure that you feel comfortable. Not that you know what you're doing, but like you feel comfortable with what you're doing before you go towards the next step. This is in direct contrast to what my husband wants me to do, which is like skip to the end and go camp in a snow cave. And I'm just like, no, we're not going to do that. So
there are like a million steps between like getting out of the door and camping in a snow cave.
So
right?
many
And
steps.
you have to like build your knowledge base about what layering works for you and what actual gear is like the best for your body for that situation, and also your nervous system comfort with the experience of being more and more exposed. The further we get away from the house or the car or whatever the like heat source is, the more exposed we are to the elements. And so there is some, like you said, this is a safety thing like you get too cold and there is some risk there. So it makes sense that like your body would be a little bit freaking out when you get a little bit further away from that safety net. And we have to build up both the skills of dressing and also the nervous system capacity to know that this is something we can handle.
That's so good. Okay, so now that we've level set on that, what you wear is going to depend on where you live and how cold it is and your experience, like we've just talked about. But there are some pretty universal truths, just like basic information for staying warm outside. So talk to us, or and for getting dressed outside, talk to us about what are they?
Yeah, so the basic rules for winter, which we can go for, and then I'm going to tell you how we sometimes can break them all too. But the like kind of go-to rules are to avoid cotton, because cotton will hold moisture close to your body. Like winter stuff is moisture management. So if you end up with moisture on your skin that gets cold, that's going to cool your body temperature down really quickly and make you cold. So we're looking for, so we like avoid cotton, avoid getting sweaty or wet close to your body. And then my other big rule is to care for your fingers and your toes, because those extremities can be easy to lose track of when you're moving. And those tend to be the things that get coldest the fastest. And then those are the basic things as you're building up the comfort with getting outside in the winter. As you get into more complex or bigger trips, sometimes we do get wet, sometimes we wear cotton, and then you're working on building the skill of drying that stuff out in a way that lets your body heat still stay at a comfortable enough temperature.
So, what I hear you saying is naturally, your body works to keep itself warm. This is what bodies do. We produce heat, and then it keeps our core warm, our internal engine, if you will. Then we have the outside factors. So, in this example, cold weather, right? Which is working to not keep us warm. And so now our bodies have to work harder. And what we want to do is aid our bodies in staying the warmth that they are already producing. And one way to do that is by not exasperating that cold by being wet, because that is not going to help us stay warm.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so then your choices with your layering or your winter clothing is going to depend on how active you feel like you're going to be. So if what you're up to is something where you can keep, like you can move without getting sweaty, if you're going at a mellow walk or the kind of thing that is like you can keep yourself from getting wet, then you can wear layers lots of warm layers that keep the heat inside. If you're doing something more aerobic where you might get a little sweat going on, then one of the mistakes people often make is they'll have a bunch of puffy layers and be sweating on the inside, because we think, well, it's so cold outside, I'm going to need all these puffy things. But actually your body is going to create quite a bit of heat when you're moving. And that is one of the things that really is one of these skills that you have to be building, is like, how warm am I going to get on this thing? And can I take some layers off so that I'm not so sweaty that I'm soaked and have to deal with the moisture situation?
When we say layers, what are we talking about here?
Typically, we're talking about some cozy base layer on both your top and your bottom, like long underwear. Maybe they're wool or synthetic, something that's probably not cotton.
Again,
And
because
then
of the wetness, because we want to
because of
like
the wetness,
take that away from our skin.
yeah, the wool or the synthetic does a better job of letting the moisture, when it like comes off your body, like moving it away from your body and out into the air. So, and cotton tends to like hold the moisture just kind of in the fabric. So then that's going to make you colder. So that's called wicking, is the term for that, where it like moves the moisture away from your body. So we got that like cozy base layer on, like close to your skin. And then depending on what you're doing for your outside time, maybe you'll have like a mid layer with like some fleece or something that is a little bit of like a warm sweatpants sort of layer in between. And then there maybe is something outside of that is more of like something that does like some wind blocking, or like a hard shell would be one of the terms for that. So that's kind of like a raincoat sort of plasticky layer on the outside, especially if it's snowing and there's some actually moisture coming down, that you want to also keep that moisture from getting through into your layers.
Yeah, yeah. And how many of these you're wearing, again, depends on where you are and the temperature and what you're doing. So I'm envisioning somebody who's running in cold weather, right? So if I'm out on a run, I might have just on tights, which are really, that's all I'm wearing on the bottom in many instances, right? So that's, if you're thinking about it in terms of layers, that's a base layer. And if I was to get cold, or it was to be really cold on my run, or if I was like hanging out at a start line or by the car or something, at a point around a run, so I'm going to go be active, I've got another layer on top of that, like a wind pant or something to keep me, or sweatpants to keep that base layer warm before I go out and start moving. And
Or
then,
like a puffy jacket, right? Like
yeah,
something
yeah, yeah.
real insulated on top of
Exactly,
that.
exactly. So, I use that example because it's like, okay, that's one activity, but maybe two different parts of it. And I would strip down to what's really on the bottom, just that base layer to do the activity. And on top of it, I've got, the back of my car is just silly because it's full of just a million layer options because this is the situation, right? Like, who knows when a hike's going to break out, right? And so I've got all of these layers in the back of my car, and then I can take them on or take them off depending on what the weather is and what I'm about to do.
Yeah, that's such a good example because you're using in that example, your body heat while you're running is going to be pretty high. So you're not going to need a lot of extra. The base layer is maybe all you need. But then the minute you stop running, you usually our trick for that is like to let some of the moisture move out for a minute, like try to just spend some time in your base layer while the moisture moves away from your skin, and then throw a bunch of puffy layers on top so you can keep as much heat on at the same time once you're done with the aerobic and your body temperature starts to drop.
Exactly, exactly. So before we dive further in here, we're talking about puffy, we're talking about base, we're talking about wool. These are big dollar sign words. uh, there's the thing you see in your mind, maybe when you think about winter gear, which is probably like some picture out of Patagonia catalog or Lululemon or REI, these people wearing these extraordinarily expensive things. And I do think to some extent you do get what you pay for, but does going outside in cold weather have to be really expensive?
Yeah, this is real. And it is true. Like, it's real different than summer where you maybe just need shorts and a t shirt and you can get by with less. So, there really are some costs to getting with clothes that will keep you warm. I don't think it has to be as high ticket as, like, maybe eventually you want, if you're going to go like climb a mountain or something like that, you really might want the lightweight, high quality, just right gear. But for most purposes, there are a lot of options for doing this on a budget. And we just wrote a blog about winter sports on a budget that we can link up in the notes here if you want to check out. Like, we did a bunch of crowdsourcing in my community for people's suggestions and how they grappled with this. The big themes of that were that used stuff is amazing, and a lot of people kick off used gear if there are any like consignment stores or thrift stores around. I tend to love Costco and their like pretty cheap gear options if you have a Costco membership. And even for some of the more technical sports and trips that we're doing, I'll often get some of that quote unquote cheaper gear because if all the stuff wears out, and sometimes those lower price tag items tend to be the most durable and can be pretty awesome. So there's no need for a different jacket for your hiking and a different jacket for winter. There's a lot of you get multi-use gear items, so you don't have to buy a new thing for every season necessarily. Definitely takes some creativity and some looking around, maybe some shopping around, but I wouldn't point people right to the high ticket items on those big name gear stores, especially as you're learning. There's a lot of good stuff at lower price tags.
Yeah, and I find that if you think about it in terms of layering, like if you start with layering on the mind, Now you're thinking about gear and how it stacks on top of each other. Like if you were going to organize your Tupperware drawer or whatever, or your grandma's Tupperware drawer, right? Everybody's grandma had a giant Tupperware drawer. Don't tell me you didn't. So if you're going to organize that and stack things, now you're thinking about clothes in that same way and how they fit together. And so when I buy like a base layer, I'm thinking about it in terms of like, how many things can I wear this under specifically? Or I'm thinking about, running tops. I actually just like those like synthetic long sleeves that you get from a race, and it's part of your registration. That's what I wear as my base layer, and I wear that to run, and I wear as a base layer when I'm skiing. I mean, that's the starting point for all this stuff. These super cheap, because it's included in the registration tops. And man, are those available at thrift shops? People get rid of those like
Sure.
crazy, right? And so
Mhm.
you think about things in terms of how they nest with each other. You may not always look like a fashion icon, but you're going to be warm.
And all those things are under everything else too, right? So
Yeah.
they don't even, who knows if anybody will ever see them.
Yeah, exactly. 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 So, speaking of layers, layer it down for us. I know it's a dumb joke, okay? But walk us through how to get dressed on a cold day. Go layer by layer. Let's pretend we're going out in the Arctic tundra and people can use their imaginations and stop where is appropriate for them.
Okay. Yeah, good. So I'm gonna put on some kind of thin wool socks first. Put them on like underneath everything else. Also, I have wool underwears and a wool sports bra that I like, really in close to my body. Typically those are cotton too for most of us. So you might want to think about even below the base layer what you're doing with the stuff that's the closest to your skin. Then I'm going to put on long underwear, legging, and same thing on the top, like a long sleeve shirt of some sort. I have a wool one that I like. That's my go-to. And then on top of that, it's going to really depend if, okay, we're going on a walk in the Arctic tundra. I'm going to be putting on a few other like cozy things. If I'm going for a ski on the tundra that I think I might get a little bit sweatier on, I'll probably just put one shell on side and I'll carry a puffy in my backpack. So if I take a break, I put that on. But if we're going for a slower walk, I'm going to put on a mid-weight, a kind of like a sweat pant but it's not a cotton one, kind of on my over my legs. You lose a lot of heat through your legs, surprisingly, so an extra warm layer there is nice. And then I'll put a shell, like a windproof layer on top of those on my bottoms, and kind of same thing on the top. I'll put a fleece on my torso, and then on top of that, maybe a puffy jacket or maybe a shell if we think it's going to be windy. And then I've got gloves. I'll have a hat. I'll also wear a buff. I really love a wool buff for going around my neck, and I'll wear that in a bunch of different fashions. And that is probably about my layering system.
I'm with you. I swap out the gloves for mittens. My hands get very cold. I'm a cold-handed lady. So so I swap out mittens, and I often use those little chemical heaters too. There's hot hands in my mittens
Yeah.
as well because in fact I have an intricate 3-layer hand system where I wear a super lightweight running glove. Brooks makes them. They wick sweat, and then I put a hand warmer in my mitten, so between those two things. And then my mittens also have like a shell, like a thick mitten top, and I put that on, and it's not sexy, but I'm warm. So but to touch anything I
Yep.
have to take off 3 layers, but I'm warm.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, the liner gloves is a really good point. I love that. Like a lightweight liner glove and then either a warmer glove on top or a mitten with some insulation in it.
Yeah.
That's really
But
nice.
I wouldn't recommend this for everybody, right? Like, I'm doing that because I know that my hands get cold. So if you know that your hands get cold, maybe mittens are something to try instead of gloves.
Yeah, that's some of the skill of and that requires trial and error to figure out really where are you? What body part is it for you?
Yeah.
We think we all are a little different in that way.
Yeah. I also love a vest. I am a vest fan. And so I do, in addition to what you mentioned, I'll do a vest on top of that fleece layer as just like an extra core situation. I don't know if this has to do with having maybe a larger chest or something like that as a woman, because women do lose a lot of heat through their chest, but I find that a vest is a secret to my success. And again, like if I'm hot, I can take it off. So it's
That's
just
awesome. Yep.
more stuff in the more stuff in that backpack. But you know, like I said, if a hike breaks out, I got my vest. I'm good.
This is such a good example too of how it's really different for different people. And for me, my torso is always pretty warm. And for me, it's my extremities that are going to get cold.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a vest for me is just like going to make the part of me that's warm extra warm. And
Right.
what I need is like the hat and the neck and the arms and legs. So it's really individual, which is
Yeah.
kind of frustrating. I think when you're getting started, you're like, wait, well, tell me what to do, and that'll make it a lot easier. But we've got to do this experimentation process, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Ex-
learn as you go.
Exactly. You also mentioned a buff, and I want to circle back to that because it can be such a broadly utilized piece of gear. You said you like to have it around your neck or use it in various ways. I often wear it around my ears or pulled like up. Again, this is the sexiest look in the land, guys. So pull up to your chin and then pull up the back of it. A buff, for those who don't know, is like a long tube of fabric. And you can actually get one through Humans Outside if you check out our shop or register for the challenge. But it goes around your neck and then you can just do all sorts of fun things with it. And so I either wear it tucked over my chin and then up around the back of my head, especially if I'm skiing because you don't want wind coming up your neck. It can keep snow from going down your neck, which let me tell you, spectacular. You do not want snow coming down your neck. Whew, that'll wake you up. Or you can use it like as a headband, and I use it as that to keep my hair back and just keep my ears covered because especially when I'm being very active outside, I don't wear a hat. I get really hot if I wear a hat. And so I take a hat off, but my ears then or my cute little ears get cold. So there's just no easy solution. But I love the buff because it is so easy to use for a lot of different things. You can use it as a handkerchief if you want to.
Wow. They're like this amazing multi-tool. I feel like I never leave the home without them. And like easy if you don't need it, you just take it off, wrap it around your wrist. It's really small. In the super cold, if there's wind, you can wrap it up above your nose and mouth even and help warm up the air before you're breathing it, which if you have asthma or sometimes just breathing in cold air can be really intense for your lungs. Having a fabric layer to help warm up the air on its way in can a buff can help with that. In the summer, I wear it as an eye cover when I'm camping because it's light all the time up here and you need something to make it.
Like a bandana.
Yeah, that's everything.
Yeah, like around your eyes, like you're blindfolded, is what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
What do most people get wrong about dressing for cold weather? When you see somebody saying, "Oh, Sarah, I'm like, oh, I'm having a hard time. I'm cold. I can't crack the code on this." What are they most often doing wrong, or what are maybe some of the most common things they're doing that are not helping them?
I'm going to say to this one that the most common thing I actually see is people overdressing, which
Hmm.
is like so counterintuitive, but it's really hard to wrap your brain around the fact that like when you're outside moving, your body heat is going to create some heat and moisture on the inside, and then once you get sweaty, it's and the chill seeps in, it's really hard to get warm again. So I would think the tricky thing is to have the layers with you, but maybe take them off at the right time so that we're not overdressed for cold temperatures, creating heat on the inside, and then making ourselves cold because we're getting sweaty when it's cold, and then it's hard to recover from that.
Yeah, yeah. As you're talking, remembered that a tool that I often forget is in my pocket for keeping warm, literally in my pocket, which is snacks. Do you find like people don't eat and then or don't drink enough and then they're cold? Because I've just like learned for myself if I hydrate more than I thought was necessary, which isn't a lot because I'm cold, right? So in my brain, I'm like, I'm not thirsty. Or if I eat, especially like a Jolly Rancher is like this secret to success because it's just sugar and it's not going to freeze. It's already hard.
Such a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought it up because that is so true when it's cold out and we're feeling a little bit like guarded, like clenched against the cold. It can be some of that shuts down digestion. It's just harder to feel like we're getting thirsty because in the summer, it's like you're sweating in the sun. It's real obvious that we need some water. But when it's cold out, even cold water doesn't sound that good. So you're like, oh, I don't want to drink more. So it can be really hard to get the body cues that you need water and snacks in the same way when it's winter, but you absolutely do. And just like you said, the sugar and the calories of a snack and the hydration in your muscles is what helps your body turn on its internal heat source. And I think that's just like such an underrated and really important thing to keep in mind. I sometimes if you're new to this and realizing that might be something that is a factor for you, sometimes setting it, like a tool I've used in the past has been to just set an alarm on my phone to remind me every hour to make sure to eat something. Maybe it's more often than an hour even, but sometimes an external factor we need to help remind us if we're not getting the cues from our body.
I am always looking for an excuse to have Jolly Ranchers in my car. So this is like, bring it on, baby.
Sugar in the wind, yeah, sugar is such a good cue to the body to like, okay, it's like an instant glucose that's gonna kick up some heat going on as your body wakes up and burn some of those calories. It's a great way to get some warmth.
The other crazy thing to me is that if you have to pee, it is harder to stay warm because I guess I'm told this is because your body is using a lot of its blood flow and, or dedicating some of that circulation that you otherwise am using to stay warm to your bladder. And if I take care of that problem, then suddenly I'm having a much easier time staying warm.
Isn't that wild?
So
Yeah, it's
crazy.
so true though. Yeah,
And to me, it's like, well, why would I go do that? That's going to mean I have to take off the layers, which we are
I
keeping
know.
on.
It's so bad. It's so, yeah, it's like short-term pain for long-term gain, but it really does make a difference. And that actually reminds me of one of my favorite layers that we haven't talked about, which is the puffy skirt.
The skirt.
I
Perhaps this is
love a
your
puffy
favorite
skirt.
underappreciated
Yes,
staying warm piece of clothing. Yes.
it is. It really is because I was skeptical about them for so long, thinking they were just sort of like a fashion statement. But I was gifted one for Christmas a couple years ago, and it's totally changed my life. The, you know, our hips, like speaking of the bladder, but like there's a lot of good muscle and area that needs to stay warm in the hips, especially for women. But man, I have some guy friends who wear puffy skirts and swear by them too. So I can't speak directly to that experience. Non binary folks, I think we all have a lot of tissue around the hips that it's so nice to have some extra comfort there. And I wouldn't have, it's pretty wild how much heat you lose through your hips and legs. And that skirt is just like an extra easy layer to throw on the outside. And you can keep the skirt on while you pee.
That's right. Now, listen, for people who I was in a Facebook group and somebody said something about a snow skirt, and then it became apparent that most of the people had never heard of this, and I hadn't heard of it before I moved here to Alaska. But guys, we are literally talking about could be like a mini skirt. That's the one I have. Could be knee length. Could be to the floor, and it is literally an insulating layer skirt that is often, I mean, it depends on what brand, but can be like a puffy jacket, but in a skirt. And it's like, it's a blanket for your legs that you're walking around in.
It is.
Yeah. And, I saw a meme that joked about how people wear like 17 jackets on top and then on bottom jeans. And well, no wonder you're cold, right? Because we forgot about our legs again. Well, as you're saying, there's a lot of goodness hosted down there. And so we should probably keep it warm. And you're losing a lot of heat through your legs in a way that we just don't think about. People who listen to this podcast know how much I love, and I just call them the pants because that's how important they are to me. I'm just going to assume if I say the pants, you know what I'm talking about. But they are a puffy pant, and it's the same concept as the skirt, but in a pant. And man, I do not hesitate to put those bad boys on. I wear them in the summertime. They live in my car most of the year. We camping, I got on the pants. We're in the cabin, I got on the pants. We had the windstorm, my power's out. Guess what I was wearing? So, I like use them all the time because I learned by going outside, like I am losing heat through the bottom and surprising amount of warmth, or as my friend would say, surprising instant warmth. So by putting on the pants.
That's so true. Yeah. I love that. I have some puffy pants that, yeah, I agree. They're incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like, I don't know, if you're really concerned about budget, that might not be the place to start. But
Right.
if for
That's what I was
comfort,
gonna
for
say.
like
Yep.
extra enjoyment or like ease of getting outside with just a little bit less feeling that you're fighting the weather,
Yeah.
puffy skirt. Put it on your Christmas list.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that comes to a very point circling back to what we talked about earlier, which is this is an experience of understanding what works for you and then making it happen over time. And that's not something that you like. Do not go out to your favorite outdoor retailer today and buy all of their array of cold weather gear, right? Start with easing in and figuring out what it is that is working for you and not right now, and then add to it over time. I bought myself these glorious pants, and the mini skirt I have after experiencing cold and understanding that, okay, this part of me is colder than it should be. What can I do about this? And then because I live in Alaska and I spend so much time outside in the cold, it made sense for me to make those investments. But that was not a day one situation by any stretch of the imagination. Day one, I swear to God, I was wearing the pictures of me going for a run in Alaska in the winter, the first year we lived here, are glorious because I am wearing running tights with, honest to God, just regular sweatpants on top of them, a fleece that I had, a vest that I got from a thrift shop in Idaho with like faux fur on it, and gloves that were by no stretch of the imagination warm enough because they were what I wore in Tennessee, and a hat that was too small for my giant head and only covered the very tips of my ears. And so
Oh, 4 years. That's yeah, but it worked, right? Like
some of it
it
worked,
worked.
some of it didn't. And
Yeah.
the parts of it that worked, like the sweatpants, that worked. I've since changed what I'm doing because I do so much winter running now that it made sense for me to get like one piece of gear that checked that box. But man, if that was something I wasn't doing very often, that absolutely worked. The gloves didn't work. Why? Because they weren't warm enough. But if I had layered those gloves under mittens, that would have worked. And so I learned those things. I think actually I went for a run with socks on my hands once, now that we're mentioning it.
Totally,
Workout.
they're mittens. Working with what you have, and then like through that experience, you realize what the issues are or what the top problems are. You tackle one of those at a time, and slowly but surely you get closer to comfort and to building up your kit. Like it's kind of like
Yes,
a winter gear kit that like takes
exactly.
some time to build up.
Exactly. Exactly. And the vest that I just described, my Eddie Bauer faux fur vest, is a great example of too many layers, right? Then I was like sweaty in the wrong places because I was wearing this, monstrosity of a piece of clothing that didn't work for me because it was too warm in that one spot, and then I wasn't warm enough in other spots. This is the experience of going outside when it's cold, guys. Like, you're going to be hot on your head and cold on your toes at the same time, and you're going to figure it out. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, and we know what that speaks to is just how much of this like effort is the experience of dealing with some discomfort. And now like with this nervous system lens that I have on this, being uncomfortable physically is a stressor to our nervous system, and that's not always something that we're up for. If we have a lot of other stress going on in our lives, this might not be the time to tackle like a lot of discomfort, and you might want to tend toward um the extra puffy so you're just like plenty warm, or to the smaller scale outings just to make it really easy on yourself. As you get more comfortable, the stuff gets easier to tackle. And then I also think about how like we can experience cold as kind of a threat. Sometimes it feels like it's like trying to get you and it can feel kind of like you're under attack outside. And I know for myself, when I'm in like experiencing it like that, I can feel my body tensing way up and feeling really guarded, kind of like you're fighting against this cold. And I really notice when I'm like feeling that and I can actually like relax into it a little bit more and let that cold kind of in. I don't know, it's like a weird way to describe it, but there's a way where you're in sort of just a little bit softer body position with the cold, and almost letting like trusting that if you let a little bit of it in and they feel a little bit of it, it gets a little bit easier somehow to be with.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a good point. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, too, about how we're always extra cold in the first cold couple of weeks of the October. And I wonder if, just kind of based on what you're saying, part of that experience of getting used to the temperature change and the season change, and for people who are maybe experiencing a cold snap where they are, and then it's going to go away, is coming to terms emotionally with what's happening. Like, okay, this is what we're doing now. I'm going to accept that. My nervous system's going to accept that. I'm going to pair that with the tools I have, whether those are things you've heard in this episode or things you just have to remember that you already know. And then I'm going to move forward in this discomfort. And then when it becomes overwhelming, I'm going to take a step back and breathe. And then when I'm ready, try again.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting thing to explore because I like the Buddhists call that the second arrow. There's one arrow that's going to happen. The cold is cold. And then there's the second arrow that's you fighting the cold and hating it the whole time. And that maybe makes the experience harder on our bodies and for sure on our minds than it actually is. I think there is some level of acceptance of it and releasing of the tension in the body that fights against what truly is, and that allows our body to actually realize that this is uncomfortable, but maybe we're still okay, even if with a little bit more discomfort, instead of feeling like this is uncomfortable and we're fighting it the whole time.
Oh, so good. All right, Sarah, we are going to leave this episode so packed with gear and ideas and even a little bit of therapy right there. I think that's so, like unexpected dose of mental health. I think that's so important when we're talking about this too. And I'd love to walk out of this just imagining ourselves in your favorite outdoor moment. If you were to close your eyes and see somewhere that you just really like to go back to and be in mentally, where are you and what are you doing?
I'm imagining a incredible moment that I had on a winter wilderness ski classic race, which was one of the really intimidating and challenging outdoor winter adventures that I did early on, and really thought I was like out of my out of my league. And there was a moment during that race where we were at the top of a pass, and there was a whole group of people who were in the race with me, and we had all gathered up there, and I realized that actually I was one of them. And it was just a gorgeous location, beautiful mountains on either side, and we had just topped out, so we had worked our way up, and now we got to go down the easy fun part. And so there was so much accomplishment and such a feeling of belonging, and realizing that the kind of like the glass ceiling that I had set for myself on my ability to be outside and recreate with other people was like, actually I was there too, really empowering. And that's some of what I feel like is possible as we step our way into these challenging environments, that we realize our capacity is much more than we knew, and we can feel really empowered, and that feeling can carry over into all different parts of life outside of the mountains too.
That is a perfect way to end this. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on Humans Outside today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. What a great conversation.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Humans Outside. If you've enjoyed this episode, take a second to leave a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. That makes it easier for others to find the podcast too. Your positive review makes a huge difference. Now, go get outside. Until next time, we'll see you out there.